In the vast chamber of the Galactic Council, representatives from 100 diverse species gathered. Each delegate occupied their designated area, a silent air of presumed superiority permeating the space despite their varied forms. Some possessed tentacles, others scales, and a few were even translucent, yet they all shared a common assumption: humanity was insignificant. Humans had only recently emerged onto the galactic scene, and they had done so quietly, lacking the grand displays and posturing typical of other races. At the chamber's center stood Exar Cole, an elder of the Shire, a species renowned for their meticulous data collection and thorough analysis. Kryl, with a gesture of one of his numerous thin appendages, initiated the proceedings. Esteemed councillors, his resonating voice filled the chamber, we convene today to discuss the unusual case of the humans. Holographic displays materialized above each delegate, showcasing charts, maps, and data summaries on humanity. The Varen, known for their cold logic, leaned in to scrutinize the figures, while the imposing Zulan, possessing immense strength, cast curious glances at the human representations. Even the stealthy and secretive Terrians appeared unimpressed. Based on our collective findings, Kryl continued, the consensus remains unchanged. Humans, while resourceful, are fundamentally driven by fear. They shun conflict at every turn, preferring diplomacy and negotiation. Their history, he acknowledged, contained skirmishes, but compared to the brutal wars other races had endured, humans exhibited no real appetite for battle. Councillor FLE, a blue-scaled Valkin with numerous eyes, emitted a dismissive hiss. Their attempts at expansion are pathetic, she declared. They've colonized a mere handful of worlds, barely defensible, and yet they consider themselves explorers. What will they do when a true threat emerges? A holographic image of Earth and its surrounding colonies materialized before Kryl, rotating slowly. Their species is young, he stated, a hint of condescension in his voice. They cling to the notion that peace is attainable. They have never encountered a genuine galactic power, not like the Thians during their collapse, or the VTH wars. Nods of agreement rippled through the chamber. The humans were perceived as soft, predictable. Conflict was something they feared, not embraced. Kryl paused, surveying the faces before him. In essence, he concluded, humans will crumble under pressure. Should they find themselves at the mercy of a stronger force, they will react as they always have, seek peaceful solutions, offer concessions, and ultimately surrender. Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. The belief that humans would recoil from any significant threat had become a comforting certainty. They were a minor species, prone to panic, and unlikely to hold their ground against a real adversary. Before the session could conclude, Councillor Thror, a towering mythal with stone-like skin, erupted in a deep, rumbling laugh. It will be amusing to observe their pleas when the time comes, his gravelly voice echoed, prompting scattered chuckles from the more warlike species present. Kryl permitted himself a small smile. Yes, the humans were amusing in their predictable fragility and fearfulness. The meeting concluded with lingering thoughts of mild amusement. When conflict arose, and it inevitably would, the humans would yield. It was not a question of if, but when. The humans had recently established their first significant colony in the Osai Belt, a modest system on the galaxy's fringe. It was a small outpost with a handful of settlers and basic infrastructure. To the Galactic Council, it was barely a footnote, a single grain of sand in the vastness of space. But to the humans, it represented a new frontier, and they were predictably proud. Then came the Thrakis. The Thrakis were an opportunistic species known for their vicious raids rather than grand territorial ambitions. They were scavengers with sleek, insectoid bodies, spindly limbs, and sharp mandibles that clicked when they communicated. Their usual tactic involved invading isolated colonies, overwhelming the inhabitants with brute force, and stripping the planet of its valuable resources before anyone could react. It was efficient, swift, and almost always successful. They had no reason to expect the humans to be any different. Within the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council, the quiet hum of numerous species filled the air. Each representative occupied their assigned space, an unspoken sense of self-importance hanging heavy despite their diverse appearances. Some displayed tentacles, Other scales, a few shimmered with translucence, yet a shared assumption united them: humanity was inconsequential. Humans were newcomers to the galactic community, entering discreetly, without the usual fanfare and boasting common to other civilizations. Exarchol, a Sha'ari elder, stood at the chamber's center. The Sha'ari were known for their meticulous information gathering and painstaking analysis. Kryl, with a lift of one of his numerous slender limbs, commenced the meeting. Honored counselors, his deep, resonant tone echoed, we are assembled today to re-examine the curious situation of the humans. Holographic projections shimmered to life above each delegate, displaying graphs, star charts, and data summaries pertaining to humanity. The Varen, famed for their detached logic, scrutinized the information, while the imposing Zulan, beings of immense physical power, cast intrigued glances at the human depictions. Even the elusive and secretive Tarian seemed unimpressed. Kryl continued, based on our combined observations, the prevailing opinion remains unaltered. Humans, although ingenious, are inherently motivated by fear. They steer clear of confrontation at every opportunity, favoring diplomacy and discussion. He conceded that their past included minor conflicts, but contrasted with the devastating wars other species had waged, humans demonstrated no genuine desire for combat. Counselor Fle, a Valkin with blue scales and a multitude of eyes, released a contemptuous hiss. Their expansion efforts are risible, she scoffed. They've settled a paltry few worlds, scarcely defensible, and yet they style themselves explorers. How will they respond when a true danger arises? A holographic representation of Earth and its nearby colonies appeared before Kryl, rotating gently. Their kind is immature, he stated, a trace of disdain coloring his words. They cling to the fantasy of achievable peace. They've never faced a legitimate galactic force, nothing like the Thians during their downfall, or the VTH wars. Murmurs of accord rippled through the assembled delegates. Humans were seen as weak, predictable. Conflict was something they avoided, not welcomed. Kryl paused, his gaze sweeping across the faces before him. Simply put, he summarized, humans will collapse under duress. Should they ever be at the mercy of a more powerful entity, they will react as they consistently have, pursue peaceful resolutions, make compromises, and ultimately capitulate. The chamber buzzed with consenting whispers. The conviction that humans would flinch from any significant threat had become a reassuring certainty. They were a minor species, predisposed to panic, and improbable to hold their own against a genuine adversary. However, before the assembly could adjourn, Councillor Thror, a towering mythal with skin resembling stone, erupted in a deep, rumbling chuckle. It will be entertaining to witness their entreaties when the moment arrives, his gravelly voice boomed, prompting scattered laughter among the more bellicose species. Kryl permitted himself a slight smile. Indeed, the humans were amusing in their predictable fragility and timidity. The meeting drew to a close with lingering amusement. When conflict inevitably arrived, the humans would crumble. It wasn't a matter of asterisk if asterisk, but asterisk when star. Humans had recently founded their first substantial colony in the Osai Belt, a modest system at the galaxy's edge. It was a small outpost, comprising a handful of colonists and rudimentary infrastructure. For the Galactic Council, it was scarcely a blip, a single speck of dust in the immensity of space. But for the humans, it represented a new beginning, a new horizon, and, predictably, they were quite pleased with themselves. Then came the Thrakis. The Thrakis were a parasitic species known more for their brutal plundering raids than any grand schemes of conquest. They were scavengers with sleek, insect-like bodies, long, thin limbs, and sharp mandibles that clicked when they communicated. Their typical strategy was to descend upon isolated colonies, subdue the inhabitants with sheer force, and pillage the planet of its valuable resources before anyone could intervene. It was a highly effective, rapid, and nearly always triumphant approach. They had no reason to believe humans would be any different. Councillor Fle, a blue-scaled Valkin with a multitude of eyes, emitted a scornful hiss. Their attempts at expansion are pathetic, she sneered. They've settled a negligible number of planets, hardly defensible, and yet they consider themselves explorers. How will they react when faced with a genuine threat? A holographic projection of Earth and its surrounding colonies materialized before Kryl, slowly rotating in the air. "They are a young species," he commented, a hint of condescension in his tone. "They cling to the naive belief that peace is attainable. They've never encountered a true galactic power, unlike the Thions during their decline, or the VTH wars." Nods of agreement echoed throughout the chamber. The humans were perceived as weak, foreseeable. They avoided conflict rather than embracing it. Kryl paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled faces. "In short," he concluded, "humans will crumble under pressure. If they ever find themselves at the mercy of a stronger force, they will react as they always have, seek peaceful resolutions, offer concessions, and ultimately capitulate." Whispers of concurrence filled the chamber. The certainty that humans would recoil from any significant threat had become a comforting assumption. They were a minor species, prone to panic, unlikely to hold their own against a real adversary. Before the meeting could adjourn, however, Councillor Thror, a massive mythal with skin like rough stone, burst into a deep, rumbling laugh. "It will be quite entertaining to witness their pleas for mercy when the moment arrives," his gravelly voice boomed, prompting scattered amusement amongst the more aggressive species. Kryl allowed himself a small smile. Indeed, the humans were amusing in their predictable fragility and timidity. The meeting drew to a close with lingering thoughts of mild amusement. When conflict arose, as it inevitably would, the humans would fold. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. The humans had recently established their first substantial colony in the Osai Belt, an unremarkable system on the periphery of the galaxy. It was a small outpost with a limited number of colonists and basic infrastructure. To the Galactic Council, it was barely a footnote, an insignificant speck in the vastness of space. But to the humans, it represented a fresh start, a new frontier, and, predictably, they were quite pleased with themselves. Before the session could conclude, Councillor Thror, a towering mythal with skin resembling cracked stone, erupted in a deep, booming laugh. "It will be quite a spectacle to witness their pleas when their time comes," his gravelly voice resonated, causing scattered chuckles among the more aggressive species present. Kryl allowed himself a small, knowing smile. Yes, the humans were rather entertaining in their predictable fragility and timidity. The meeting adjourned with lingering thoughts of mild amusement. When conflict inevitably arrived, the humans would surely crumble. It wasn't a matter of asterisk if asterisk, but asterisk when star. Humans had only recently founded their first significant colony in the Osai Belt, a relatively unremarkable system on the fringes of the galaxy. It was a modest outpost, consisting of a small number of settlers and rudimentary infrastructure. To the Galactic Council, it was practically insignificant, a mere speck of dust in the vastness of space. However, for the humans, it represented a fresh start, a new frontier, and, predictably, they were filled with pride. Then the Thrakis arrived. The Thrakis were an opportunistic species known more for their brutal raiding tactics than grand ambitions of conquest. They were scavengers, with sleek, insectoid bodies, thin, spindly limbs, and sharp mandibles that clicked when they communicated. Their typical method involved invading isolated colonies, overwhelming the inhabitants with sheer force, and plundering the planet of its valuable resources before anyone could mount a defense. It was an effective, swift, and almost always successful strategy. They had no reason to suspect the humans would be any different. The Thrakis' fleet descended upon the human colony without warning, easily breaching its minimal defenses. Their angular, menacing ships eclipsed the light from the colony's sun, casting long, ominous shadows over the human settlement. On board the Thrakis' command vessel, Overseer Zaro observed the initial bombardment with cold satisfaction. The humans wouldn't last long, they never did. "This will be finished by the next rotation," Zaro hissed, his mandibles clicking together in anticipation. Humans fear conflict. They will surrender before we even need to deploy ground troops. But as the first plasma blasts ripped through the colony's atmosphere, something unforeseen occurred. The human forces, if they could even be called that, didn't disperse or send out desperate pleas for negotiation. Instead, a garbled transmission came through. Zaro blinked his 3 beady eyes in confusion. "What was that?" he questioned. His sub-commander, Ziv, tilted his head, equally perplexed. It appears they are not surrendering, Overseer. Zaro waved a dismissive claw. Let them bluster. They are soft creatures, fearful, weak. Once we make landfall, they will change their tune. As the first plasma blasts ripped through the colony's atmosphere, an unexpected reaction unfolded. The human forces, if they could even be considered such, didn't scatter or plead for negotiations. Instead, a distorted transmission crackled through. Zaro, blinking his 3 beady eyes, questioned, "What was that?" His second-in-command, Ziv, equally bewildered, responded, "It seems they aren't surrendering, Overseer." Zaro dismissed it with a wave of his claw. Let them posture. They are fragile beings, timid and weak. Once we land, they'll change their tune. But as the Thrakis drop ships descended, the humans continued their resistance. More than resistance, they fought back with an unexpected ferocity. The initial ground assault, planned as a simple mop-up operation, encountered something far different from the panicked, desperate species they'd anticipated. Human soldiers charged forward, yelling unusual war cries, wielding primitive weapons compared to Thraki standards, but with a frightening enthusiasm. Makeshift explosives, repurposed mining lasers, even hand-to-hand combat, it didn't matter that they were outmatched, the humans fought with a recklessness that bordered on suicidal. And, disturbingly, they appeared to be enjoying themselves. One human soldier, a large, unkempt man with a wild grin, was captured on a Thraki's feed swinging a massive wrench into the side of a drop ship. "Get some," he roared, laughing maniacally as the ship sputtered and crashed. "What are they doing?" Zaro hissed, watching the chaotic battle unfold on his screen. "They should be retreating, begging for mercy." But the humans weren't begging, weren't even afraid. They seemed exhilarated by the chaos, throwing themselves into the fight with reckless abandon, shouting insults and taunts at their attackers. At one point, a Thraki's patrol cornered a small group of humans in a supply depot. The Thrakis aimed their plasma rifles, confident in the humans' imminent surrender. Instead, one of the humans, an older woman with graying hair tied back, smirked, raised a makeshift flamethrower, and yelled, "Burn, baby, burn," before engulfing the Thraki's patrol in flames. Zaro slammed his claws on the control panel. This is madness." Ziv, standing beside him, was visibly disturbed. "It seems we miscalculated, Overseer. Their response to conflict isn't what we anticipated. They're acting like they're having *fun star." The Overseer's mandibles clicked nervously. His soldiers were trained for combat, disciplined, strategic, efficient. But this was something entirely different. The humans fought without any apparent regard for self-preservation, treating battle like some kind of sport. And, worst of all, they weren't giving up. As the battle stretched on, an unsettling feeling grew in Zaro's thorax. These humans weren't like any species they'd encountered. They didn't fear conflict. In fact, they seemed to actively seek it out. And that, more than anything, was unsettling. Aboard the Thraki's command vessel, Overseer Zaro paced, his exoskeleton clicking with each agitated step. The humans weren't behaving rationally. This wasn't how invasions were supposed to unfold. "Send in reinforcements," he barked. "Crush them before they gain any more ground." The screen flickered, and Zaro's command was interrupted by a live feed from the surface. What appeared was nothing short of absurd. A human soldier, covered in soot, his helmet askew, stood triumphantly atop a disabled Thraki's walker, waving at the camera and giving a thumbs up. "What the? Turn that off." Ziv, now trembling, quickly cut the feed. "Overseer," he stammered, "the humans, they seem to be getting more aggressive." I don't think they're stopping." "Impossible." Zaro snapped. "We've bombarded their defenses, outnumber them 3-1, and they still haven't surrendered." "What are they doing down there?" On the planet's surface, the Thraki's troops were experiencing firsthand what could only be described as utter lunacy. Human tactics, if they could even be called tactics, defied all expectations. Instead of retreating, regrouping, or employing standard military formations, they charged in disorganized mobs, laughing, yelling, and hurling insults. It was as if survival was an afterthought. Aboard the Thraki's command vessel, Overseer Zaro paced restlessly, his exoskeleton clicking with each anxious movement. The humans were behaving irrationally. This wasn't how invasions were supposed to proceed. Deploy additional forces, he shrieked. Overwhelm them before they gain any more territory. The view screen flickered, and Zaro's order was interrupted by a live transmission from the planet's surface. The image that appeared was utterly preposterous. A human soldier, coated in grime, his helmet askew, stood triumphantly atop a disabled Thraki's walker, waving at the camera and giving a thumbs-up gesture. What in the? Deactivate that display. Ziv, now visibly shaking, hastily cut the feed. Overseer, he stammered, the humans, they appear to be becoming increasingly aggressive. I do not believe they intend to cease their assault. Preposterous. Zaro snapped. We have bombarded their defenses, outnumber them 3-1, and they still refuse to surrender. What are they doing down there? On the planet below, the Thraki's ground troops were experiencing what could only be described as unadulterated madness. Human combat strategies, if they could even be termed strategies, defied all logic. Instead of retreating, regrouping, or utilizing conventional military formations, they attacked in disorganized hordes, laughing, shouting, and hurling insults. It was as though their own survival was a secondary concern. One Thraki's commander, Kenth, was leading a squad through the wreckage of the colony's industrial sector when they encountered what appeared to be a human barricade. They approached cautiously, weapons at the ready, anticipating the usual resistance. But instead of snipers or strategically placed explosives, they were met with the deafening blare of music. Kenth tilted his head in bewilderment as the humans blasted some form of primitive audio from large speakers positioned around the barricade. It was loud, jarring, and full of rhythmic thumping. His translator struggled to decipher the lyrics, but the word "party" seemed to recur frequently. "Commander," one of his soldiers hissed, What are they doing?" Kenth was about to respond when the humans suddenly surged from behind their barricade, charging directly at the Thrakis with an assortment of improvised weapons. One human had fashioned a metal pipe into a makeshift hammer, another wielded what appeared to be a sharpened shovel, and a third had strapped explosives to a drone that buzzed through the air with a cheerful hum. Kenth's squad opened fire, but the humans were too quick. The human with the hammer swung wildly, smashing through Thraki's armor as if it were made of paper. Another soldier, a human woman with a bandana, yelled, "Eat this," and launched a grenade directly into their formation, sending several Thrakis flying. The squad was decimated within moments. Kenth, barely managing to crawl behind cover, stared in disbelief as the humans continued to rampage through the industrial zone, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. They moved as if they had no fear of death, worse, they appeared to be enjoying themselves. The Thrakis had encountered countless species in their time, and all of them, when confronted with overwhelming odds, had exhibited at least some degree of self-preservation. But the humans? They didn't retreat, they didn't regroup, they didn't even attempt to rationalize their actions. They charged, they laughed, one of them even had the audacity to high-five his comrade in the midst of the battle. Kenth's comms buzzed, and Overseer Zaro's voice crackled through. "Kenth! Report! Why haven't you neutralized them yet?" The commander's mandibles trembled as he struggled to articulate a response. "Overseer, I don't understand. These humans, they're not reacting like any species we've encountered before. Then crush them." Zaro roared, his frustration evident. "They are primitive, inferior. They cannot sustain this kind of resistance indefinitely." Kenth wiped a layer of grime from his face and peered over the rubble. In the distance, he saw a human soldier waving a metal rod like a victory banner. He ducked back down and muttered to himself, you'd really think. Back on the command ship, Zaro was becoming increasingly frantic. His screens were ablaze with casualty reports. Thraki's troops were being overwhelmed, not by superior numbers or tactics, but by what could only be described as human lunacy. On one screen, a human engineer had hacked into a Thraki's walker and was now using it to perform elaborate, and frankly ridiculous, dance moves. Ziv, watching with growing horror, turned to Zyro, his voice barely a whisper. "Overseer, I believe we've made a grave miscalculation. The humans, they don't fear conflict. They thrive in it." Back on the Thraki's command ship, Zyro was in a state of near panic. His displays were flashing with casualty reports, his troops overwhelmed not by superior tactics or weaponry, but by what could only be characterized as human madness. One screen displayed a human engineer who had somehow managed to hack into a Thraki's walker and was now using it to perform a series of elaborate, and frankly ridiculous, dance moves. Ziv, watching with mounting horror, turned to Zyro, his voice barely above a whisper. "Overseer," he stammered, "I believe we have made a grave error. The humans, they do not fear conflict. They revel in it." Zyro slammed his claw down in frustration. "Nonsense. They are a minor species. We will crush them. No matter how absurd their methods, they cannot maintain this." But even as he spoke, Zyro couldn't shake the unsettling feeling in his gut. The humans were unpredictable, chaotic, and worst of all, they were winning. High above the chaotic scene unfolding on the human colony, the Galactic Council observed with increasing bewilderment. What had begun as a routine session of detached observation had devolved into something far stranger, far more concerning. Exar Cole, who had so confidently presented humanity as a species to be dismissed, now watched the battle feeds with a noticeably twitching appendage. The humans were supposed to be predictable. Instead, they were proving to be a loud, messy, and utterly baffling anomaly. "Counselors, as you can see," Kryl began, his previously calm tone now laced with a distinct strain, "the humans are responding to the Thraki's incursion in ways that we did not anticipate." That was an understatement. The screens in the Grand Chamber displayed live footage from the colony, where Thraki's forces were, against all predictions, being systematically and hilariously outmaneuvered. One human soldier was currently riding a captured Thraki's armored vehicle like a surfboard, whooping and hollering as it careened down a hill, its panicked Thraki's occupants struggling to regain control. On another screen, a group of humans had rigged a construction crane to swing a massive steel beam, knocking Thraki's drop ships out of the sky like some sort of intergalactic game of baseball. The cheers of the humans were deafening as each ship spiraled down in flames. "What in the stars are they doing?" roared Councillor Jathan, a towering Ural with 4 muscular arms and no discernible neck. "Is that human *riding * an enemy vehicle?" "It would appear so," muttered Cole, rubbing his multiple eyes in disbelief. Councillor Nishi, a sleek, eel-like Irani, let out a hissing sound that was somewhere between laughter and horror. "They treat warfare as if it were some kind of festival. This is utterly absurd." But not all of the council members found it amusing. Fle, the Valkin councillor who had so readily dismissed the humans as weak, now sat frozen in her seat, her scales paling. She watched, speechless, as one human ran directly towards a Thraki's walker, seemingly without a care in the world. "Their strategy, it's chaos. It's madness," she whispered. "They should be falling apart under this pressure." Exar Cole attempted to regain some semblance of control. "Perhaps this is a temporary surge of adrenaline," he suggested, though the uncertainty in his voice was clear. A species in desperation often resorts to unpredictable behavior. But even as he spoke, a new feed appeared on the main screen. A squad of Thrakis, their sleek black armor shimmering in the dim light, moved with the precision and discipline expected of a highly trained unit. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them collapsed, and they tumbled into a pit filled with what appeared to be rubber chickens. Dozens of squawking rubber chickens. The humans, hidden in nearby cover, erupted into uncontrollable laughter as the Thraki soldiers struggled to free themselves, their movements only producing more absurd squawking noises. Councillor Jathan stood, his massive frame shaking with rage. "This is an insult to the very concept of warfare," he bellowed. "They are turning battle into a joke *. The council was on edge now, their earlier smug confidence rapidly dissolving. The Thrakis, previously seen as a formidable raiding force, were being made to look foolish. And the humans weren't just surviving the onslaught, they were thriving in the chaos, turning every encounter into a bizarre spectacle. "We must act!" Jathan roared, slamming all four of his fists onto the table, sending vibrations through the chamber. "If the Thrakis cannot handle these lunatics, we should intervene." Cole held up a hand, attempting to quell the rising panic. "Counselors, please!" "We mustn't rush into," he was cut off as the chamber's holo-communicator blinked to life. The panicked face of Thror, the mythal counselor who had once laughed at the idea of human surrender, appeared on the screen. "Counselors," he stammered, "we are receiving reports from Thraki's command. They are requesting reinforcements. They say the humans are out of control star." The entire chamber fell into stunned silence. Reinforcements? From a species that prided itself on swift, overwhelming conquests. This was unheard of. The Thrakis never asked for reinforcements, they simply took what they wanted and left. And now they were on the verge of collapse because of the humans . "That's impossible!" FLE hissed, her multiple eyes darting between the screens. "They're not a major power. They're barely a blip on the galactic radar." Cole's calm demeanor was gone, replaced by visible concern. It seems we may have misjudged their response to conflict." Nishi, who had been quietly observing the chaos with a bemused grin, finally spoke. "Or perhaps," she said with a slow, deliberate hiss, "they simply enjoy conflict more than we thought."